Rock DIY or do it you. I'm going to change both fuel filters on the BX23S. So I have two filters, a pair of pliers for getting the clamps off the hoses that go to the filters, a drain pan, and then I also have two sets of long nose vice grips, and then I put these pieces of rubber on here that I will clamp onto the hoses, and this is just to prevent the hoses from getting damaged from the vice grips themselves. And then a pair of gloves, and I have an extension on my ratchet with a 10mm socket to remove the clamp that holds the fuel filter in place. I am using a 12-inch extension on my ratchet just to make it easier to get to the bolt that holds the filter in place. So in my case, I did loosen this up only because getting access to where you have to put pliers on these clamps right here is nearly impossible to get to, but by loosening the filter, it allows you to turn them so that you can actually slide them off the barbs on the filter. Because this one's over here, but this one's on the back side, so this will allow me to turn it. And then also want to pay attention to which way this arrow right here is pointing, because you want to make sure you put the filter on the same exact way, and the arrow is pointing in that direction. I didn't mention it earlier when I mentioned the tools that are needed, but you also need a flat tip screwdriver to put underneath the edge of the hose, and then you just want to slowly pry around the entire hose to get it off the barbs that are on the filter. A safer alternative than using a flat tip to pry the hose up is if you have a pair of needle nose that have a very thin tip. It's a lot easier to remove the hose when you're pushing on both sides of the hose. If you get just up under it, you can push it up pretty easily if you have something like this. So I've got the new fuel filter on, the one that's next to the engine, and you got the arrow pointing in that direction. Got the clamps turned both the same direction, so it'll be easier the next time I have to do it. And then in order to purge the air out of the system, turn the ignition to on but not start it for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, start it, let it run for 30 seconds, then shut it off, and that will purge the air out of the system. The fuel filter that's underneath, basically right up underneath where the seat is. So I'm gonna take out this 10mm bolt to loosen it up, just to give me easier access to clamping the hoses off and removing the two clamps. Make note of the orientation of the filter so that you put it back in the right way. This fuel filter is definitely a pain to remove, especially back this way, trying to get the clamp off. So if you ever get an opportunity to put a longer hose on it, I'd recommend that, just so you can avoid having to go through this all the time. Removing this plate here would have made no difference in removing it. I decided to cut open both of the fuel filters on the Kubota BX23S. This fuel filter is the one that's next to the engine. This is the fuel filter that's underneath the tractor, and I did use a hand saw, nothing electrical to cut these. But one thing that's noticeable right from the bat is the one next to the engine is definitely a lot cleaner than the one that's underneath the tractor. You may or may not be able to tell in the video, but this one's definitely darker than this one. And if you look between the fins, especially on the one that was underneath the tractor, it's a lot darker, and you can actually see little granules, dark granules in there. And then also inside you can see some sediment, or not sure exactly what it is, but it's definitely dirtier inside than the one that's on the side of the engine. If you look down inside this one, there's almost nothing inside. And just to back up a second, so the arrow is pointing that direction, so this is coming from the tank, goes into the canister, filters through, the fuel filters through the filter, and then comes out here. This is what the fuel filter looks like when you cut all the way through it. So this portion up here is glued onto the plastic, while this section isn't. Into the user manual on page 117, the fuel filter element is supposed to be checked at 100, 200, 300, and then checked at 400 and replaced at 400. But I ended up replacing both fuel filters because historically in the area that we live in, there has been issues, mainly due to a lot of rain and humidity, so there's always water in the fuel, and my tractor was operating a little sluggish, so I'm at 80 something hours right now. So I've replaced both, and we'll see if it operates better than it did before. Please like, comment, or subscribe. Thanks again.